Hi everyone, okay, lines are now closed and votes have been counted and verified. The next series will be on games from Bobby Fischer's famous annotated collection, My 60 Memorable Games. I would have been happy with either end result. I like this one because Fischer is my personal all-time favourite player by a long way. He was an absolute visionary and became a legend long before he died early last year. Looking on YouTube, quite a few of his 60 memorable games, which include several draws and 3 losses, have already been covered. What I'm going to do is make videos of all the remaining games, so that in the end we'll be able to make a brand new YouTube page with all 60 memorable games, if all annotators involved agree to do it. Before the first game in the book, there's a quote from the great Emanuel Lasker, second official world champion, that goes, "On the chessboard, lies and hypocrisy do not survive long. The creative combination lays bare the presumption of a lie. The merciless fact, culminating in a checkmate, contradicts the hypocrite." I think it's a quote that can certainly be applied to the way that Bobby Fischer played chess, which at its peak was with pinpoint accuracy and irrefutable logic. The game we're going to look at this time is one he played against the incredibly talented German Grandmaster Wolfgang Unzicker in Zurich in 1959. Introductions to each game are given by Fischer's longtime friend and second in the 1972 Candidates Tournament Grandmaster Larry Evans, a fellow American. This game is entitled Milking the Cow, and Evans says, "The Roux-Lopez has been so extensively analyzed that often both players reel off their first 20 moves in 2 minutes flat. Nevertheless, it gives rise to situations that call for tact and patience. As Bronstein remarked, when you play the roux, it's like milking a cow. Fischer here milks the cow to a fare thee well." So let us get underway. Bobby, as usual, opened with e4, and then came the Roux-Lopez, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and bishop b5. Play continued into the closed variations, with a6, bishop a4, knight f6, white castled, and bishop e7. Then came the main line, rook e1, b5, bishop b3, and d6, which makes knight a5 a threat to win the bishop pair. So white plays c3, and now black castles, and white plays h3, preventing bishop g4, and intending to play d4, and then knight on b1 to d2, f1, and either g3 or e3 with a solid positional advantage. Black generally tries to prevent this with queenside and central play, combined with pressure on e4. We're still well within book lines of 50 years ago though, and the game continued, knight a5, bishop c2, preserving the bishop pair, and c5, which is still mainline despite the permanent weakening of d5 here. One system that avoids this, given by Fischer, is playing instead c6, where one line goes d4 and queen c7, which is an interesting and solid, if slightly passive, alternative to playing c5 immediately, which is what Unzicker did. So then came d4, queen c7, and knight bd2. And here, as at many stages for black in the Roux-Lopez, there are many options. Fischer gives several: king h8, rook e8, or d8, and also knight c6, to name a few, and says that he doesn't think there's any easy way for black to achieve complete equality, and adds, but who knows. Unzicker continued with the main line bishop d7, and then came knight f1, rook f e8, knight e3, g6, d takes e5. Finally the central tension is broken. D takes e5, and knight h2, which is another reason for playing h3 in the opening, because white, after rook a d8 can now get his queen to a good attacking square, f3, from where she is also defending the sensitive e4. So then came bishop e6, knight hg4, knight takes g4, and h takes g4, which provides white with a dynamic battering ram to use against the black king. This double g pawn can just be liquidated by advancing it up the board. And Fritz doesn't like this approach though, and prefers instead knight takes g4, which Fischer says he tried and found to be inferior in a game against Matanovic at Petoras in 1958. I mean, he tried it then, but he's obviously analysed it in depth. Play in that game continued. Bishop takes g4, h takes g4, c4, g3, knight b7, king g2, preparing to use the h file, knight c5, rook h1, and f6, which is given as an equal position, but black will soon have powerful use of the d3 square here for his pieces. But anyway, back to the game continuation. After knight takes g4 came h takes g4 and queen c6 from Unzicker, and not knight c4, because now will come knight d5, bishop takes d5, and e takes d5, which gives white a small edge along with the bishops and the passed pawn. So white would be definitely better here. But yeah, so the game continuation was queen c6. And now came g5, which is one of Fischer's many contributions to opening theory. The main idea, he says, is to clear g4 for his knight before black can force the exchange of knights with knight c4. And he points out too that black has many resources in this continuation, and this game is a good example. So what happens if black simply takes this pawn that's been offered as a gambit? Let's have a look. If bishop takes g5, then knight d5 is the best way for white to continue, discovering an attack on the undefended bishop at g5 from this bishop here at c1. And best is bishop takes c1 and not bishop takes d5, because bishop takes g5 is gonna win white the exchange. So bishop takes c1 is better. Now comes knight f6 check, and best play goes king h8, rook a takes c1, and not knight takes e8, because black gets good play for the exchange after bishop g5, knight f6, and knight c4. So rook a takes c1. Now best play goes rook f8, queen g3, queen c7, queen g5, and king g7, where white can now force a draw if he likes with knight h5 check, or play for more with either f4 or rook e3 and swinging the rook over to the king side. In any case, there's certainly good enough compensation for the pawn. For the sake of keeping things relatively simple, I didn't include all of the analysis here in this g5 line. There was a fair bit more there, and it just goes to show how deep Fischer went into his preparation and his opening analysis. So to get back into the game, anyway, g5 is what he's just played, and Unzicker declined this pawn and instead played knight c4. So now Fischer plays knight g4 as planned, which is the point of playing g5 before, and this is threatening knight f6 check, meaning that black would have to lose his vital dark squared bishop, because it's going to fork the rook at e8. So here Unzicker gave up the bishop pair with bishop takes g4, and Fischer was a fan of the bishops, and it's easily possible that his h takes g4 and g5 contribution to opening theory in this line had as one of its objectives the winning of the bishop pair in this manner, along with the opening of the h file, which is certainly going to favour white after queen takes g4. Okay, I'll have to do this video in a couple of parts, so that's the end of part 1.